I was 14 years old when they shoved us into the cattle cars. 70 people pressed against 70 people. No room to sit, no air to breathe, just the smell of fear and urine and my mother's perfume that she'd put on that morning because she said we had to maintain our dignity no matter what. I can still smell that perfume sometimes. Jasmine. It makes me sick. Even now, 84 years old, when I walk past a flower shop and catch that scent, my stomach turns and I'm back in that cattle car, pressed between bodies, listening to people pray and cry and slowly lose their minds. My name is Miriam Katz, and for 70 years I blamed God for everything that happened in that place. For 70 years, I carried a rage so deep, it became part of my bones, part of my blood, part of every breath I took. I would wake up in the middle of the night with my fists clenched, my jaw tight, my whole body rigid with anger that had nowhere to go. My husband Joseph used to hold me during those nights, but he couldn't reach the place inside me that was screaming. Nobody could. I wouldn't let them. And then, at 84 years old, I went back to Auschwitz. I went back to the place where I lost everything, where I watched my mother and my little brother walk toward the showers that weren't showers, where I survived when I shouldn't have, where I stopped believing that God gave a damn about any of us. I went back, and everything I thought I knew about suffering, about justice, about God Himself, it all shattered like glass. If you're watching this, if something in this story is pulling at you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Leave a like. I need to know these words are reaching somebody, that maybe my story can help someone else find what I found. Because what I found, I never expected. Not in a million years. We were an Orthodox family in Krakow. My father was a rabbi, a gentle man with soft hands and a voice like warm honey who spent his evenings teaching Torah to young boys in our dining room. I can still see the candlelight on their faces, the way the flames would flicker when someone opened a door. Still hear the rhythm of their voices chanting Hebrew words that were supposed to protect us, supposed to mean something. My father would rock back and forth as he taught, his eyes closed, completely absorbed in the ancient texts. He believed every word. He believed God heard every prayer, saw every sparrow fall, counted every hair on our heads. My mother kept a kosher home so strict that we had separate dishes for meat and dairy, separate sinks, separate towels, separate everything. She would spend hours in the kitchen preparing meals, making sure everything was done exactly according to the law. I remember watching her hands as she kneaded challah dough every Friday afternoon. Strong hands that had kneaded thousands of loaves, hands that braided the bread with such practiced grace, it looked like a dance. We observed Shabbat like it was the most important thing in the world. Friday nights, my mother would light the candles at exactly 18 minutes before sunset, not a minute earlier or later, and she would cover her eyes with her hands and whisper prayers that I thought were reaching heaven. Her voice would shake with emotion, with devotion, with absolute certainty that God was listening. I thought we were His chosen people, and that meant something. That meant we mattered. That meant we were safe. I had a brother, David. Davidele, my mother called him. Little David. He was 9 years old, small for his age, with enormous brown eyes and a gap between his front teeth that made his smile crooked and perfect. He collected rocks, ordinary rocks from the street, the river, anywhere we went, and he would arrange them by size and color in our bedroom. He had names for his favorites. There was Goliath, a smooth black stone he'd found by the Vistula River, and Shimshon, a reddish one with white stripes. I thought it was silly, this collection of rocks, but now I would give anything to hold one of those stones, to touch something he touched, to have some physical piece of him left in this world. They came for us on a Tuesday morning in March of 1944. I remember it was raining, a cold rain that felt like needles on my skin, that made the cobblestones slick and treacherous. The sky was the color of ash. The SS officers didn't knock. They broke down the door with a sound like thunder, like the world splitting open. One of them, a young man with pale blue eyes and acne scars on his cheeks, grabbed my father by his beard. That beautiful beard he'd grown his whole adult life, and they cut it right there in our living room while my mother screamed. They used kitchen scissors, our kitchen scissors, the ones my mother used to cut chicken. They made us watch. My little brother David was only 9 years old, and he was crying, asking why they were hurting Papa. Why was Papa bleeding? And my mother kept saying, "Shh, Davidele, shh." But her voice was shaking so badly the words barely came out. They gave us 20 minutes to pack. 20 minutes to decide what mattered from an entire lifetime. My mother's hands were shaking so hard she could barely close the suitcase. She packed food. Bread she'd baked 2 days before, some hard cheese wrapped in cloth, 6 apples from our cellar. She packed our Shabbat candlesticks, the silver ones that had belonged to her grandmother. My father grabbed his prayer shawl, his tallit with the blue stripes and the fringes he'd tied himself, and a small Torah scroll that fit in his hand. I grabbed a photograph of all of us taken the summer before, when we went to the countryside and stayed with my mother's cousin, and David caught a frog in the pond, and we laughed until our stomachs hurt. In the photograph, we're all smiling. My father has his arm around my mother. David is holding his frog. I'm looking at the camera like I own the world. That photograph made it to Auschwitz with me. I kept it in my dress, against my skin, and I would take it out at night and look at their faces by moonlight. I lost it somewhere in the chaos of selection, and I've mourned that photograph almost as much as I've mourned my family. They marched us through the streets to the train station. It was only 6 blocks, but it felt like 6 miles. Our neighbors watched from their windows. Some of them were crying. Most of them just stared. A few looked away, like if they didn't see us being taken, it wasn't really happening. Mrs. Kowalski, who used to buy bread from my mother every week, stood in her doorway with her arms crossed and said nothing. Absolutely nothing. Years later, I learned she moved into our apartment the day after we were deported. She took our furniture, our dishes, our photographs off the walls. She erased us like we'd never existed. The train ride took 3 days. We stood the entire time because there was no room to sit, no room to even shift your weight without pressing into someone else's body. People died standing up, their bodies held upright by the press of living bodies around them. We didn't know they were dead until the train stopped and they fell. The smell was unbearable. Human waste because there was no bathroom, just a bucket in the corner that overflowed within hours. Vomit from people who couldn't keep down what little food they'd brought. Death, which has a smell you never forget, sweet and rotten and wrong. My mother made us pray. She insisted we pray the Shema every morning and every evening, even there, even in that hell on wheels. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. She would close her eyes and say the words with such conviction, such faith, and I would watch her and think, how? How can you still believe? I said the words with her because I was her daughter and I loved her, but I didn't mean them anymore. How could I mean them when God was letting this happen, when He was watching us suffer and doing nothing? We arrived at night. I remember the lights, those terrible bright lights that turn night into a harsh, shadowless day, and the dogs barking, huge German shepherds straining at their leashes, and the SS officers screaming, "Raus! Schnell! Raus! Get out! Hurry! Get out!" We stumbled out of the cars, stiff from standing for 3 days, weak from hunger and thirst, and the smell hit me immediately. It was like nothing I'd ever smelled before, sweet and rotten and chemical all at once, like burning sugar and burning meat and something else I couldn't identify. I didn't know yet what it was. I didn't know it was burning flesh. I didn't know they were burning people like garbage, like trash, like we were nothing. They separated us on the platform, men to one side, women and children to the other. My father grabbed my hand. His hand was trembling, or maybe mine was, or maybe both of ours were. He looked at me, and his eyes were so full of love and terror, and he said, "Miriam, remember who you are. Remember you are a daughter of Abraham. God will not forsake you." Those were the last words my father ever said to me. A guard hit him with a rifle butt across the shoulders and dragged him away into the crowd of men. I never saw him again. I don't know how he died. I don't know if it was fast or slow, if he suffered for months in the labor camp, or if they killed him that first night. I don't know if he kept his faith until the end, or if he finally broke like I did. I don't know, and the not knowing has haunted me for 70 years. My mother held David's hand on one side and mine on the other. Her grip was so tight it hurt, like if she just held on hard enough she could keep us safe. We shuffled forward in a line, and there was a doctor there. An SS doctor in a clean uniform that looked obscene next to our filth and exhaustion, and he was pointing. Left, right, left, right. I didn't understand what it meant. It seemed arbitrary. Some people went left, some went right, and nobody explained anything. When we got to him, he looked at my mother, looked at David, and pointed left. Then he looked at me, up and down like I was livestock being evaluated at market, and pointed right. My mother started to argue. She said in Polish, "No, she's my daughter. She stays with me." And the doctor just smiled. He smiled like this was amusing to him, like our terror was entertainment. And he said in German, "She's strong, she works. You go with the boy." A guard pulled me away. I was screaming, fighting, trying to get back to them, and my mother was reaching for me with her free hand because she wouldn't let go of David with the other, and David was crying, "Miri, Miri," over and over. And then they were gone. Just gone into a crowd of people being herded toward a building with a chimney that was belching black smoke into the night sky. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. If I had known, I would have fought harder. I would have died with them, but I didn't know. And they died alone, without me, and I lived. They shaved my head, all of us in a line, and they shaved our heads with electric clippers that pulled and cut and didn't care about the pain. My hair fell in dark waves around my feet, beautiful hair that my mother used to brush every night before bed, 100 strokes, and she would tell me I had hair like Queen Esther. They stripped us naked in front of everyone, in front of the male guards who looked at us like we were objects, less than human, just bodies to be processed. They tattooed a number on my left forearm, A73492. The needle felt like a wasp sting that went on, and the ink burned. And I can feel it right now, even though it happened 70 years ago, raised and permanent, a brand that marked me as less than human, as property of the Reich. They threw a filthy striped dress at me, rough fabric that scratched my skin, and wooden shoes that didn't fit. Too big, so they rubbed blisters on my heels within hours, and they shoved me into a barracks that held 800 women in a space meant for 50 horses. The bunks were wooden planks stacked 3 high, no mattresses, no blankets, just hardwood. We slept 6 women to a plank, pressed together for warmth, because the cold in that place went straight through to your soul. Winter in Poland is brutal, and the barracks had no heat, gaps in the walls where the wind came through, and we would huddle together at night, strangers sharing body heat, trying to survive until morning. Some women didn't make it. You would wake up next to a corpse, someone who had died in the night while you slept, and you would feel guilty for being grateful it wasn't you. I found out that first night what had happened to my mother and David, a woman from Warsaw, a woman who'd been there for 6 months and had seen everything, told me matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather. The ones who went left, she said. They went straight to the gas chambers. They're already dead. Already smoke from the chimney. I threw up. I vomited until there was nothing left inside me but bile and rage, and the woman just patted my back and said, "You'll get used to it, or you'll die. Those are the only two options here." I stopped praying that night. Completely stopped. The other women would gather in the evenings, huddled in corners of the barracks, and whisper prayers, and I would turn my face to the wall and curse God in my mind. What kind of God allows this? What kind of God watches children burn and does nothing? They told us we were chosen. They told us we were beloved. They lied. Or God lied. Or God didn't exist at all. I decided God didn't exist. It was easier that way. Easier than believing in a God who would let this happen. I survived 11 months in Auschwitz. 11 months of starvation on watery soup with a few pieces of rotten turnip floating in it, and a slice of bread that was more sawdust than wheat. 11 months of watching women collapse and die during roll call that lasted for hours in the freezing cold, while the guards counted and recounted us like we were inventory. 11 months of seeing the capos, the prisoner overseers, beat other prisoners to death for stealing a potato, for not working fast enough, for looking at them wrong. 11 months of smelling that smell every single day, that sweet, rotten chemical smell of burning flesh, and knowing it was people. It was human beings. It was children. It was mothers and fathers and grandparents going up in smoke. I survived because I was young and strong and lucky. That's all. Not because God protected me, not because I was special, not because I deserved it more than the ones who died. Just dumb, random luck. I got assigned to a work detail that wasn't as brutal as others. I didn't get typhus until the very end. I didn't attract the attention of a guard having a bad day. Luck. Nothing but luck. The Russians liberated us in January of 1945. I weighed 73 pounds. My body was skeletal, my ribs visible, my legs like sticks that barely held me up. I had typhus and dysentery and frostbite on 3 toes that eventually had to be amputated. I didn't care if I lived or died. Part of me wished they'd just let me die, because what was the point? Everyone I loved was dead. My family was smoke. God was either powerless or cruel, and either way, I wanted nothing to do with him. They put me in a displaced persons camp. I stayed there for 4 years. 4 years in limbo, not quite dead but not really alive, just existing. I met Joseph there in 1946. He was from Lodz, had survived 3 different camps, lost his entire family just like I had. We understood each other's nightmares. We would wake up screaming and we wouldn't have to explain. We got married in 1947, not because we were in love, but because we needed someone who understood. Someone who wouldn't ask us to pretend to be normal. I immigrated to America in 1949. Joseph and I settled in Brooklyn, in a neighborhood full of other survivors, people with numbers tattooed on their arms and trauma in their eyes. We spoke Yiddish with each other because English felt too new, too clean, too disconnected from who we'd been. We ran a small bakery on Avenue J. I made challah and rugelach and babka using my mother's recipes that I'd memorized before they took her. Every Friday I baked challah, and every Friday I cried while I braided the dough because my mother's hands should have been doing this, not mine. We had 2 children, Sarah in 1952 and Benjamin in 1955. I loved them fiercely, desperately, but I was terrified every moment of every day that someone would take them from me. I wouldn't let them out of my sight. I walked them to school and picked them up. I checked on them every hour through the night to make sure they were still breathing. Joseph said I was smothering them, but I couldn't stop. I'd already lost 1 family. I couldn't lose another. I went through the motions of Judaism because it was my identity, my culture, my connection to the world I'd lost. I lit Shabbat candles because my mother had lit Shabbat candles, not because I thought God cared. The act of lighting them connected me to her mother, to generations of Jewish women doing this same ritual. But I didn't believe the prayers anymore. I fasted on Yom Kippur out of tradition, not repentance. What did I have to repent for? I was the victim. If anyone needed to repent, it was God. I was a Jew without faith, and the bitterness in my heart grew deeper every year. Where are you watching this from? What city? What country? I want to know because I need you to understand that suffering is universal. It doesn't matter where you are. You've felt pain, you've felt betrayal, you've asked God where He was when you needed Him. Leave me a comment and tell me where you're from. Let me know I'm not alone in this. Because for 70 years, I felt completely alone. Joseph died 12 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive and brutal, and he suffered terribly at the end. He lost 60 pounds in 3 months. The morphine made him hallucinate. He would call out for his mother, for his brother who died at Treblinka, for people I'd never heard of. And I sat by his bed and thought, this is what we survived for? To suffer again? To watch everyone we loved die? When he finally passed, I felt relief. Not grief. Relief. And then I felt guilty for feeling relieved. And the guilt and the rage and the bitterness just kept piling up until I could barely breathe under the weight of it. My children tried to comfort me. Sarah would visit every week with her husband and their kids. Benjamin would call from California where he'd moved for work. They would say, "Mom, we're here. You're not alone." But they didn't understand. They couldn't. They hadn't been there. They hadn't seen what I'd seen, smelled what I'd smelled, lost what I'd lost. They were American Jews, comfortable and safe, and I loved them, but I couldn't talk to them about the darkness inside me. I went to a survivors group for a while. We would meet in the basement of a synagogue and sit in a circle and talk about our experiences. But it didn't help. Everyone was stuck in the same place I was. We would trade stories of horror like we were comparing scars, and nobody had any answers. Nobody could tell me why we'd survived when our families hadn't. Nobody could tell me what it had all been for. Last year, my granddaughter Rachel came to me with an idea. Rachel is Sarah's oldest daughter, 26 years old, studying for her PhD in history. She specializes in Holocaust studies, which I've always found both painful and comforting. Painful because it keeps the trauma alive, but comforting because it means the world won't forget, can't forget. She said there was a memorial ceremony at Auschwitz for the 80th anniversary of the liberation. She said she wanted to go, wanted me to go with her, wanted to bear witness together. I said no immediately. Absolutely not. Why would I go back to that hell? Why would I relive that nightmare? I'd spent 70 years trying to forget, trying to move forward, and she wanted me to voluntarily walk back into the place of my worst trauma. But Rachel was persistent. She came back the next week with brochures, with information about the ceremony, with details about how they'd preserved the camp, how they were honoring the survivors. She said, "Grandma, you've carried this alone for so long. Let me carry it with you. Let me see where you came from so I can understand who you are. Let me witness what you witnessed so I can tell the story when you're gone." That last part broke me. When you're gone. I'm 84 years old. I don't have many years left. And when I die, my memories die with me unless I pass them on. The woman from Warsaw who told me about the gas chambers, she died 10 years ago, and her stories died with her. The capo who used to sneak us extra bread sometimes, she died 30 years ago, and nobody remembers her kindness. I didn't want that. I didn't want my mother and David to disappear completely when I died, so I agreed. I don't know why I agreed. Maybe because I'm 84 years old and I'm tired of carrying the weight alone. Maybe because some part of me thought if I went back, I could finally let go of the rage. Or maybe I just wanted to spit on that ground one more time and say, I survived you. You didn't win. I'm still here. And you're gone. We flew to Poland in January of last year. The flight was long, 12 hours from New York to Warsaw, and then a smaller plane to Krakow. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the cattle car, smelled that smell, heard David crying. Rachel held my hand during the flight. She didn't say much. She just held my hand and let me be scared. The cold when we landed was exactly the same as I remembered. That bone-deep cold that makes your lungs hurt when you breathe, that seeps into your joints and makes your bones ache. We took a bus from Krakow to Auschwitz, the Polish town where Auschwitz is located. And as we got closer, I felt my chest tightening. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing. Rachel noticed and said, "We can turn around, Grandma. We don't have to do this. I can tell them you're sick." But I shook my head. I'd come this far. I was going to face it. The camp looks different now. It's a museum. There are signs and plaques in multiple languages explaining what happened here. There are tour groups with audio guides, teenagers with their phones taking selfies at the entrance gate, which made me sick to my stomach. How can you take a selfie at a death camp? But then I thought, maybe it's good. Maybe it means the world hasn't forgotten. Maybe it means this can't happen again. But the moment I walked through that gate, the one that says Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free, I was 14 again. The buildings looked the same. The barbed wire fences looked the same. The guard towers looked the same. And I could smell it. I swear I could smell it. Even though the crematoriums haven't operated in 70 years, even though the barracks have been cleaned and sanitized and preserved, I could smell it. The ghosts were everywhere. Rachel and I walked through the barracks slowly. They've preserved some of them exactly as they were, with the wooden bunks and the tiny spaces and the photographs on the walls of the prisoners who died here. Thousands of photographs. Faces of people who had names and families and dreams and futures until they didn't. I stopped in front of a photograph of a young girl who looked like my friend Esther. Esther was from Krakow too. We were in the same barracks. She died of typhus 3 weeks before liberation, so close to freedom, and I held her hand when she died and promised I would remember her. I've kept that promise. Esther Rosenbaum, 16 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. I started shaking looking at that photograph. Rachel asked if I was okay, and I couldn't answer because I wasn't okay. I would never be okay. How could I be okay standing in this place where so many people I loved had suffered and died? We went to the ruins of the gas chambers and crematoriums at Birkenau. The Nazis destroyed them before they fled, trying to hide the evidence of what they'd done. But you can still see the foundations, the underground rooms where people undressed because they thought they were taking showers. There are signs explaining how it worked. How they would pack people into these rooms, how they would drop the Zyklon B pellets through openings in the ceiling, how it would take 15 to 20 minutes for everyone to die, how the Sonderkommando, the Jewish prisoners forced to work in the crematoriums, would then remove the bodies and burn them. I stood there in the snow, looking at these ruins, and I thought about my mother taking off her dress, the good wool dress she'd worn on Shabbat. I thought about her holding David's hand, maybe whispering to him that everything would be okay, maybe singing him a lullaby to calm him down because he was scared of the dark. And then the doors locking and the panic starting and people realizing what was happening and the screaming starting and the gas dropping and children crying for their mothers and mothers trying to shield their children with their bodies and everyone clawing at the walls and at each other trying to breathe, and slowly, horribly, they all died. I fell to my knees. I literally collapsed on that frozen ground and I screamed at God for the first time in 70 years. Not a silent curse, not a whispered complaint, an actual scream that came from the bottom of my soul. Where were you? Where the hell were you when they were dying? When my mother was dying? When David was dying? What kind of God are you? What kind of God lets this happen? Rachel was crying, trying to help me up. And then there was another woman there, a volunteer with the memorial organization, and she knelt down next to me in the snow. She was maybe 50 years old, with kind eyes and short gray hair, wearing a jacket with the memorial organization's logo on it. She said softly in English, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened to you here." I looked at her, and through my tears, I said bitterly, "Are you Jewish?" She said, "No, I'm a Christian." I actually laughed. A horrible, broken laugh that sounded like breaking glass. I said, "Then you have no idea. Your God did this. Christians did this. Don't talk to me about sorry." The woman didn't leave. She stayed there on her knees next to me in the snow, and she said, "You're right. Christians did participate in the Holocaust. They did terrible, unforgivable things. Many of them stood by and did nothing while you suffered. And I'm so sorry, but can I tell you something about my God? He didn't stand at a distance watching you suffer. He came down into the suffering. He became human, and he was tortured, and he was murdered by the Romans, and he knows what it feels like to be abandoned." I wanted to tell her to shut up. I wanted to walk away. But something in her voice stopped me. There was no pity in it, no condescension, just genuine sorrow and something else I couldn't identify. She continued, "Jesus was a Jew. Did you know that? He was a Jewish man from Nazareth. He was persecuted by the Romans. He was stripped naked and beaten with whips that had metal in them that tore his flesh. He was nailed to a cross through his hands and feet and left to die in agony. And at the moment of his greatest suffering, when he was dying, he cried out, 'My God, why have you forsaken me?' He felt what you felt, the abandonment, the betrayal, the sense that God had turned his back, and he didn't deserve any of it. He was innocent, just like your mother was innocent, just like your brother was innocent, just like you were innocent." I was shaking my head, tears streaming down my face, soaking into the scarf around my neck. And I said, "What good does that do? What good is a God who suffers with us but doesn't stop the suffering? If he's God, he could have stopped this. He could have stopped the Nazis. He could have saved my mother and David. But he didn't. So either he couldn't, which means he's not God, or he wouldn't, which means he's not good." She said, "That's the question, isn't it? That's the question every person who suffers asks. And I don't have a complete answer. I don't think any human does. But I know this. God didn't cause the Holocaust. Evil humans caused the Holocaust. Humans with free will who chose hatred over love, who chose violence over peace, who chose to see other humans as less than human. God gave us free will, and we use it to destroy each other. But even when we're destroying each other, God doesn't abandon us. He enters into the suffering with us." I said, "That's not enough. It's not enough for God to suffer with us. We need him to stop the suffering." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "He did stop it. Not in the way we want, not by preventing it from happening in the first place, but by transforming it. He takes the worst thing that humans can do, the murder of God himself, and he transforms it into salvation. He takes death and makes it into life. Not because the suffering doesn't matter, but because he refuses to let suffering have the final word. He took the worst thing that ever happened, the crucifixion of an innocent man, and turned it into the best thing that ever happened, redemption for the whole world." I don't know how long we sat there in the snow. My knees were numb from the cold. My face was frozen from the tears. Rachel was standing a few feet away, giving us space, but I could feel her watching, worried. It felt like hours. It was probably only 10 or 15 minutes, but something was happening inside me that I couldn't explain. This woman, this Christian stranger, was saying things that shouldn't have made sense to me, that should have made me angrier, but instead, they were cracking something open. I thought about my father's last words. God will not forsake you. I'd thought he was wrong. I'd thought God had forsaken all of us, had turned his back while we burned. But what if God had been there the whole time, suffering with us, weeping with us, dying with us? What if the question wasn't, where was God, but why do humans keep rejecting God and choosing evil? The woman helped me stand up. My legs were shaky, and she and Rachel both supported me. She said her name was Anna, and she was from Munich, Germany, and she dedicated her life to Holocaust education and reconciliation. She said, "I can't speak for what Christians did during the Holocaust. Many of them failed terribly. Many of them betrayed everything Jesus taught. But I can tell you what Jesus did. He died for the people who killed him. While they were nailing him to the cross, he prayed, 'Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.' He forgave his murderers. And if he can forgive them, maybe, just maybe, healing is possible for you too." I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to hold on to my rage because it was all I had left, because without the rage, I didn't know who I was anymore. Rage had been my identity for 70 years. Rage at God, rage at the Nazis, rage at the world, rage at myself for surviving when better people died. But I was so tired. 84 years old and so tired of being angry, so tired of carrying hatred, so tired of waking up every morning with this weight on my chest, so tired of believing that my suffering was meaningless. Rachel and I stayed in Poland for 3 more days. Anna met with us each day. She didn't preach at me. She didn't try to convert me. She just talked about Jesus like he was a real person who really cared about real suffering. She showed me passages in the Jewish scriptures, in the Tanakh, prophecies about the Messiah that I'd heard my whole childhood in synagogue, but never connected to Jesus. Isaiah 53. I'd heard my father teach this passage dozens of times. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed." Anna said, "This is about the Messiah, a suffering Messiah, not a conquering king who would overthrow the Romans, but a servant who would suffer and die for the sins of the people." And that's exactly what Jesus did. I said, "Jews don't believe the Messiah has come yet. We're still waiting." She said gently, "I know. But what if he already came, and you missed him because he didn't look like what you expected? What if the Messiah came as a suffering servant first, and he'll come back later as a conquering king?" On our last full day in Poland, Anna took us to a small congregation of Messianic Jews in Krakow. I'd heard of them before, always with contempt from other Jews. Traitors, we called them. Confused. Deceived. Jews who'd abandoned their faith to follow the Gentile religion. But when I walked into that small meeting space above a bakery and heard them praying in Hebrew, singing psalms I'd grown up with, celebrating Shabbat the way my parents had, lighting candles and blessing bread and wine, and then talking about Yeshua, about Jesus, as the fulfillment of everything we'd been waiting for, something shifted deep inside me. The rabbi, a man named David Lieberman, actually named David like my little brother, he was maybe 60 years old with a gray beard and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He talked about the scapegoat from Leviticus 16. I remembered this from my childhood. On Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the high priest would take 2 goats. One goat would be sacrificed, and its blood would be sprinkled on the mercy seat to atone for the sins of Israel. The other goat, the scapegoat, the high priest would lay his hands on its head and confess all the sins of Israel over it. symbolically transferring the sins to the goat, and then the goat would be sent into the wilderness to die, carrying the sins away. Rabbi David said, that scapegoat represented someone. It pointed forward to someone who would actually carry our sins, our suffering, our shame, and take it away from us forever. That someone was Yeshua. Jesus became our scapegoat. He carried our sins on the cross. He took them away into death so we could be free from them. I thought about the lamb my mother used to prepare for Passover, the blood on the doorposts that protected the Israelites from the angel of death. I thought about all the sacrifices in the temple, thousands upon thousands of animals killed year after year to atone for sin. I thought about all the rituals, all the prayers, all the waiting for a Messiah to come and save us. What if he'd already come? What if I'd been so angry at God that I'd missed him? What if Jesus was the Passover lamb, the scapegoat, the Messiah we'd been waiting for, and I'd rejected him because Christians had done terrible things in his name? After the service, I talked to Rabbi David privately. Rachel went to get coffee with some of the younger people in the congregation, and Anna sat with me and the rabbi in a small office. I told him everything. Auschwitz, my family, the 70 years of rage, my encounter with Anna at the ruins of the gas chamber. I told him I didn't know what to believe anymore, that my whole life I'd thought I knew who God was and who I was, and now everything was upside down. He listened without interrupting, and when I was finished, he said, Miriam, God never stopped being faithful to the Jewish people, even when we rejected him, even when we didn't recognize the Messiah when he came. God sent his own son as a Jew, born to Jewish parents, circumcised on the 8th day, raised in a Jewish home, studying Torah, celebrating the feasts, living as a faithful Jew. He came to the Jewish people first, and he died to make a way for all people, Jews and Gentiles, to come home to God, to be reconciled, to be healed. He paused and then said, You don't have to stop being Jewish to accept Yeshua. You don't have to become a Gentile. You become a completed Jew. You find what our ancestors were looking for. You find the Messiah who Isaiah prophesied about, who David sang about in the Psalms, who all the prophets pointed toward. You find the one who can actually heal the wound in your soul, the one who suffered like you suffered, who was abandoned like you felt abandoned, who died and rose again to prove that death doesn't have the final word. I went back to my hotel room that night and I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother's prayers, about my father's faith, about David's innocence, about the millions who died believing God would save them. And I thought about Jesus, this Jewish man who claimed to be the Messiah, hanging on a Roman cross, innocent, suffering, abandoned by God for a moment, crying out, Why have you forsaken me? Just like I'd cried out at the ruins of the gas chamber. The idea that God himself had felt what I felt, that he'd entered into human suffering and experienced abandonment and torture and death, it didn't make sense. It defied everything I thought I knew about God. God was supposed to be above suffering, beyond it, untouchable. But what if God loved us so much that he refused to stay above it? What if he loved us enough to come down into it, to experience it himself, to show us that even in the worst suffering, we're not alone? I got down on my knees beside the hotel bed, something I hadn't done since I was a child praying with my mother. My knees cracked. My back hurt. I felt ridiculous. An 84-year-old woman kneeling on a hotel room floor talking to a God she wasn't sure was listening. But I did it anyway. I said, Yeshua, if you're real, if you really are the Messiah, I need you to show me, because I can't do this anymore. I can't carry this rage anymore. I can't live with this bitterness anymore. I can't wake up every day hating you and hating myself and hating the world. If you died for me, if you suffered for me, if you understand what I went through, then I'm yours. Take this broken mess and do something with it. Please. I didn't hear a voice. There was no lightning bolt, no angelic choir, no miraculous vision, but there was peace. For the first time since I was 14 years old, there was peace in my chest where the rage had been. Not happiness, not the absence of grief, not the erasing of memory, just peace. The kind of peace that told me I wasn't alone anymore, that I'd never been alone, that even in Auschwitz, even in the darkest moment of human history, God had been there suffering with us. I cried that night, but they were different tears than the ones I'd cried for 70 years. Not tears of rage, not tears of bitterness, tears of release, tears of finally letting go of a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. I flew back to New York a different person, not fixed, not healed completely, not suddenly joyful and carefree, but different. Something fundamental had changed. I had hope. I had a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just survival. I had a Messiah who understood suffering from the inside. My children thought I'd lost my mind when I told them I believed in Jesus. My son Benjamin, my own son who I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, he said, "Mom, after everything Hitler did to us, you're going to become a Christian? You're going to worship the God of the people who murdered our family?" His voice was full of hurt and anger and betrayal, and it broke my heart. I tried to explain that I wasn't becoming a Christian in the way he thought, that I was still Jewish, that Jesus was Jewish, that I was completing my Judaism, not abandoning it. But he didn't want to hear it. He said I was confused, that Anna had manipulated me, that I was having some kind of psychological breakdown from going back to Auschwitz. We haven't spoken in 6 months. He won't take my calls. That's been one of the hardest parts of this whole thing, losing my son after I'd already lost so much. My daughter Sarah was more understanding, but still confused and worried. She said, "Mom, I just want you to be happy. If this makes you happy, if this gives you peace, then okay. I don't understand it, but okay." But I could see the concern in her eyes, the fear that her mother was slipping away from her, that I was becoming someone she didn't recognize. She still calls me every week, still visits, but there's a distance now that wasn't there before. I lost friends, people in my synagogue, survivors I'd known for decades, people who'd been through hell with me. They looked at me like I'd betrayed them. One woman, Ruth, who'd been in Auschwitz with me, who'd slept on the same wooden plank, who'd shared her bread with me when I was starving, she said to my face, "How can you accept the God of the people who murdered us? Have you forgotten what they did? Have you forgotten what happened to your mother?" I tried to explain that Jesus wasn't the God of the Nazis, that the Nazis had rejected Jesus and his teachings just as much as they rejected the Jews, that Jesus himself was Jewish and was murdered by an empire, but she wouldn't listen. She walked away from me, and we haven't spoken since. That hurt. That still hurts. I understand her anger. I understand her feeling betrayed. But I can't go back. I can't unknow what I know now, but I found a new family too. Anna connected me with a Messianic congregation in Brooklyn called Congregation Beit Simcha, House of Joy. It's small, maybe 30 or 40 people, half Jewish, half Gentile, all believing in Yeshua. They welcomed me with open arms when I walked in for the first time. Nobody pitied me. Nobody treated me like a fragile Holocaust survivor who needed to be handled carefully. They treated me like a sister, like family, like I belonged there. They pray in Hebrew and English. They celebrate Shabbat on Friday nights with candles and challah and wine. They observe the biblical feasts, Passover and Sukkot and Shavuot, but they see them through the lens of what Yeshua accomplished. Passover isn't just about the exodus from Egypt anymore. It's about the greater exodus from slavery to sin that Yeshua accomplished through his death and resurrection. The Passover lamb points to Yeshua. The unleavened bread points to his sinless body. The wine points to his blood that was shed for us. They study Torah every week, and they help me see things I'd never seen before. Connections between the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament. Prophecies about the Messiah that I'd read 100 times but never understood. They don't ask me to stop being Jewish. They celebrate that I'm Jewish. They see Jewishness as a gift, as the foundation of the faith, as the root that the Gentile believers have been grafted into. I started reading the New Testament for my first time, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Stories about Yeshua's life and teachings, and I saw him differently than I'd ever imagined. He wasn't the blonde, blue-eyed European Jesus I'd seen in paintings all my life. He was a Middle Eastern Jew, dark-skinned, dark-haired, speaking Aramaic and Hebrew, celebrating Passover and Hanukkah, debating Torah with the rabbis in the temple, eating kosher food, wearing tzitzit with fringes on his prayer shawl. He was one of us, and the Romans killed him the same way the Nazis killed us, because he threatened their power, because he told the truth, because he loved people the empire considered expendable. The parallels were impossible to miss. Yeshua was executed by an oppressive regime, just like millions of Jews were executed by an oppressive regime. He was a victim of state-sponsored murder, just like my mother and David were victims of state-sponsored murder. But the difference was that Yeshua chose it. He could have called down angels to save him. He could have avoided the cross, but he chose to go to it because he knew that his death would accomplish something, would pay for something, would open a way for broken people like me to come home to God. I'm 85 now. I've been following Yeshua for just over a year. My son Benjamin still doesn't speak to me, and that grief sits in my chest like a stone. My daughter Sarah visits, but we don't talk about faith. We talk around it like it's a dangerous topic that might explode if we touch it. But Rachel, my granddaughter, the one who took me back to Poland, she's been asking questions, deep questions. She's been coming to congregation with me on Friday nights. She's been reading the prophecies in Isaiah and Psalms and the other prophets. She's been studying the New Testament. I see something awakening in her, a light in her eyes that wasn't there before, and it fills me with a joy I didn't think I was capable of feeling. Last month, I went back to Auschwitz again, not for a memorial service, not with a tour group, just me and Anna and a small group of people from her organization in Germany, Christians who dedicate their time to Holocaust education and reconciliation between Christians and Jews. We went to bear witness, to pray, to remember. We prayed at the ruins of the gas chambers and crematoriums at Birkenau. We prayed for the souls of the murdered, all 6 million Jews and the millions of others who were killed in the camps. We prayed for healing for the survivors, for those of us who carry the scars in our bodies and souls. We prayed for the perpetrators, that even they might find repentance and redemption, though that prayer still catches in my throat every time. That last part was almost impossible for me. Praying for the Nazis, praying for the guards who beat us, praying for the doctor who separated me from my mother, praying for the capos who made our lives hell. But Yeshua prayed for the people crucifying him. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. If he could do that in the moment of his greatest agony, I could at least try. I didn't feel forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe I never will completely. But I tried. That's all I can do. I stood at the spot where I'd collapsed a year earlier, where I'd screamed at God, where Anna had first told me about Yeshua, and I thanked God. I actually thanked him. Not for the Holocaust. Never for that. The Holocaust was evil, pure evil, human evil. But I thanked God for sustaining me through it, for keeping me alive when death surrounded me on every side, for bringing me through 70 years of rage and bitterness to this moment of peace, for showing me that suffering doesn't have the final word. Love does. Redemption does. Resurrection does. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, if you've listened to an old woman pour out her heart for all this time, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing. Thank you for caring enough to hear what I have to say. If this testimony has moved you, if it's made you think, if it's sparked something in your heart, please subscribe to this channel. These stories need to be told. These testimonies need to be heard. There are people out there right now, maybe you, who are carrying rage just like I carried rage for 70 years. People who think God has abandoned them. People who've been through hell and can't find their way out. People who need to know that the Messiah came precisely for the broken, the abandoned, the traumatized, the ones who think they're beyond redemption. Subscribe so these stories can reach them. Please. I don't understand everything. I still have questions that don't have answers. I still have nightmares where I'm back in Auschwitz. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night with my fists clenched and my jaw tight. I still see my mother's face when I close my eyes. I still hear David's voice calling my name. I still feel the weight of survivor's guilt, the question of why I lived when better people died. But now I have hope. I have a Messiah who understands suffering from the inside, who doesn't just watch from a distance but entered into the horror with us. I have a God who didn't stay safe in heaven but came down to earth and experienced betrayal and torture and execution. I have a future that extends beyond death, beyond the chimneys, beyond the darkness. I have a promise that one day God will wipe away every tear, that there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, that the old order of things will pass away and everything will be made new. I met with Rabbi David from the Messianic congregation in Krakow over video call last month. He asked me how I was doing, how my faith was growing, if I had questions. I told him about losing my son, about the pain of being rejected by my community, about how hard it is to hold on to faith when the cost is so high. He said something that helped me. He said, "Miriam, Yeshua told his disciples, 'In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world.'" Following Yeshua doesn't mean life gets easier. It means you don't face the hard things alone anymore. That's been my experience. Life hasn't gotten easier. The grief is still there. The memories are still there. The loss is still there. But I'm not alone in it anymore. I have Yeshua walking with me through it, carrying what I can't carry, healing what I can't heal, redeeming what seems unredeemable. My name is Miriam Katz. I'm 85 years old. I survived Auschwitz. I lost my parents and my little brother in the gas chambers. I blamed God for 70 years. I carried rage and bitterness for longer than most people live. And then I met the Jewish Messiah, Yeshua, who died on a Roman cross and rose from the dead, and everything changed. Not the past. The past still happened. The suffering was still real. The evil was still evil. But the meaning changed. The future changed. Death didn't win. Hatred didn't win. Love won. And love's name is Yeshua. I don't know how much time I have left. Could be a year. Could be 5 years. Could be 10 if I'm very lucky. But however much time I have, I want to spend it telling people that even in the darkest places, even in hell on earth, God is there. Even when it feels like He's abandoned you, He's there. Even when you can't see Him or feel Him or hear Him, He's there. And one day, all of this will make sense. One day we'll understand. One day, God will explain why He allowed what He allowed. And one day, everything sad will come untrue. Until that day, I keep walking. I keep remembering. I keep telling my story. I keep lighting Shabbat candles every Friday night. I keep celebrating Passover every spring. I keep studying Torah every week. And I keep following Yeshua, the Jewish Messiah who suffered and died and rose again so that people like me, broken people, traumatized people, angry people, bitter people, could find healing and hope and home. Shalom, and may the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who sent his son Yeshua to redeem us all, bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and give you his peace. May you never carry your pain alone. May you find the Messiah who enters into suffering with you. May you know that death doesn't have the final word. Love does. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for witnessing my journey. Thank you for being here.